All right, welcome to the reading. Get right to it. It's a very short one. I didn't have anything new, so I went and cheated and I dug in the vault for an old piece I wrote for the American Conservative in '06, back in a much simpler time, pertaining to George W. George W. Bush and the Iraq War. All right, anyway, this is a little story. Let's get this on some proper visuals first. There we go. All right. This is funny, too. I mentioned 2020. This was written way back in '06. So I mentioned 2020 in my speculative future scenario. Alas, we had no idea just how weird 2020 would be. Anyway, this is a story from October '06. I had just started out. In the bunker with Barney, Laura, and me. Quote, I will not withdraw even if Laura and Barney are the only ones supporting me, unquote. George W. Bush. The following diary fragments were found by rebel forces of the breakaway American states near the ruins of George W. Bush's secret bunker at the close of the Second Civil War in May of 2008. The author is unknown, signing only his initials, DD. Various explanations abound for DD's identity, all speculative, some wildly fanciful, such as the legend that he was an obscure quote-unquote blogger, a phrase for professional and dilettante writers, political activists, exhibitionists, and others who used the internet for self-publishing before the Unitas Act of 2020 solidified the Second Republic's absolute control over the media, ushering in the long repression of the mid-21st century. By this account, after abandoning his early opposition to the administration, DD became a fervent supporter in his last days, and somehow, with the zeal and determination of a convert, managed to insinuate himself into the upper echelons of the administration, just as it descended into confusion and madness. All indications are that his role was that of a domestic servant. The diary makes obvious the other residents considered him an insignificant dullard. This likely explains why they were unguarded in his presence, allowing this invaluable document of the bizarre death throes of the Bush regime. April 5th. I think the stress is starting to take its toll on the president. Earlier today, I went to clean his quarters. I was surprised to find him standing before a full-length mirror, practicing his oratorical hand gestures and muttering under his breath. I gaped in shock. Hearing the sound of a muffled cough, I looked to see the First Lady sitting across the room watching, sullenly taking long drags from a cigarette. She smashed it out violently in an overfull ashtray and, turning to withdraw another, caught sight of me. I pretended I'd just walked in, saying, Mr. President, I found that copy of Rebel in Chief we've been looking for. He didn't seem to hear, but when he caught sight of me in the mirror, he said, How long you been in the service, son? Before I could reply, he returned to his muttering, delivering a one-liner and mustering a sickly version of his familiar chuckle. It was frightening, seeing him like that. I hurried out, feeling the First Lady's eyes on the back of my neck. I'm beginning to suspect that things aren't going as well as the president says. April 9th. Today, Rove caught me, again, as I tried sneaking past his quarters. D, would you come in here a moment, please? He said in that unctuous voice he uses when he wants something. I braced myself and went in. I was appalled to find that awful green silk bathrobe, all he's worn for days now, was left open, revealing what had to be a thong. He was covered in oil and reddened from lying in his tanning bed. I wonder if you might help me. I need to apply this lotion and I can't quite reach. I have to feed Barney, I stammered. Mrs. Bush, I mean the First Lady, will kill me if I don't. Women, he said, shaking his head, advancing on me. Why do we bother? Well, the dog can wait. Barney, I mean, not Laura. He gave me that creepy little laugh he uses when he thinks he said something clever. You won't tell Dad I said that, will you? Our little secret? He said the last part in a low, conspiratorial tone. As he came near, I backed away, bumping into the wall. I slid sideways until I fell out the open door. Gotta feed the dog, I said nervously over my shoulder as I hustled away. Gotta feed Barney. Okay then, maybe later, he said casually, pretending not to notice my discomfort. Damn, that guy's persistent. April 12th. As I was passing the conference room this morning, the president called me in. Dee, come here, check this out, he said cheerfully. I allowed myself the hope that he was going to say we'd be leaving the bunker soon. Have I shown you this? He had been leaning over a scale model of a city. He stepped back and smiled proudly, spreading his arms in presentation. What is it, sir? I said, disguising my disappointment. The room was a shambles. Everything had been hastily cast to the walls to make room for the model's well-lit preeminence in the center of the squalor. It's Baghdad, he said. Oh, of course, I said, still feigning. See, here's the airport. Here's the road to the airport. See the cars? Everything's safe and secure. See the people? They're voting. What's that, sir? I was sorry the moment I asked, but the futuristic structure on the outskirts of the city was out of place, cobbled together with what appeared to be the modified parts of a child's toy. That's the Bush Freedom and Liberty Mosque, he said, his enthusiasm quickening. It's going to be open to Muslims and Shiites alike. Let me show you. George, the First Lady called sharply from behind me. The look of a chastened boy came over the president's face. I instinctively came to attention. I shifted to the side and, careful not to make eye contact, excused myself with a mumble. I hurried down the hallway before stopping in my tracks. Rove's door was open. A muted, down-tempo R&B beat and the scent of marijuana emanated from his room. I turned about on my heel. Too late. Dee! It was the vice president. Get in here. He motioned at me from the other end of the hallway. I had to pass Rove's open door to reach the VP's quarters. I looked deliberately ahead. Out of the corner of my eye, Rove's leer taunted me through the dim resolution of the black light. Worse, I thought I saw Bolton's white mustache glowing in the darkened recess behind him. Excuse me a moment. Over a constellation of glinting studs that would have to be one of his leather get-ups. They would be at it for a while. Great, another shitty night's sleep hiding in the pantry. Come on, double time, the VP barked impatiently, going back inside. When I came in, I saw General Pace and General Casey standing at attention before a folding table covered in maps. See this idiot? The vice president said, pulling me into the room with what felt like a claw. The two stared straight ahead. Look at him, he thundered. The two sheepishly complied. There was an awkward, embarrassing moment as we stared dumbly at one another. The room was colder than ever. The steam from our breath pawed at the air between us like ghostly forelimbs. This moron can do a better job than you two. He gave me a rough shake. In fact, he's about to replace you incompetent bozos. What do you think of that? Pace began to speak, then thought better. Go ahead, miss. Let's hear what you have to say, the VP growled. We'll try harder, sir. We just need another 6 months to turn this thing around. Pace's voice quavered on the verge of one of his legendary crying jacks. Get the hell out of here, the vice president said without looking at me, shoving me back out the door. I'm starting to wonder what I've gotten myself into. April 15th. When I went to clean the conference room today, I found Ladine bent over the Baghdad model. Using one of Goldberg's Star Trek toys, he was pretending to strafe and bomb the city, spraying the streets with spittle as he mimicked the sound of bombs and gunfire, punctuating here and there with the anguished cries of the wounded. I managed to slip back out before he saw me. April 19th. I sneaked out into the garden today against the VP's orders, just to escape the relentless drone of the ventilation system. It was shrouded in silence and a cool mist, an incredibly peaceful contrast to what was going on inside. It was so still for a moment I swore the war wasn't real. The impulse to flight welled up, terrifyingly. Then I heard something, barely perceptible, but clearly the sound of a hushed, urgent voice. I followed it, my accelerated heartbeat sending a hot pulse through my temples. I thought the enemy had found us. I half expected to find a commando whispering into a headset, setting up a raid. Then I heard a phrase I recognized. Following the voice, I came upon the president, bundled against the chill and reclining in a lounge chair. He was facing away, revealing his profile. He was speaking just above his breath, reciting the programmed phrases that had been the boilerplate of his speeches to the nation, in a maniacal, urgent tone. He spat the words out as if to purge himself of them. Occasionally he would punctuate a sentence with an exaggeration of one of his stock facial expressions, now gross caricatures. It was only then I realized how lost we are. Too overcome to turn away, I looked down in shame. "Not exactly what you signed on for, is it?" he said. It was a voice that I didn't recognize. It was relaxed, unguarded, natural. He was looking at me over his shoulder. The mask that was the man I thought I knew was revealed in its absence. This man was more familiar somehow. He could have been anyone. He had the look of a wearied penitent resigned to fate with gratitude. I came closer so I wouldn't have to speak up. "No, I don't think any of us signed on for this, sir." I worried he'd take my fellow feeling for a complaint, but his look conveyed an instant, grateful understanding. "Well, sorry anyway." He turned away. Just as I was about to leave, he said, "You know, I was almost baseball commissioner once." "I know." I hesitated a moment. "You would have made a good commissioner, Mr. President." He faced me, grinning thanks, before looking down into his lap, lost in thought. He caught himself and looked up and said in the same old jesting bravado, "No, I would have made one hell of a Commissioner D." I straightened up and nodded, forcing a grin. "Yes, sir, I would have liked to be there." Turning around, I nearly walked into the First Lady. I came to attention. She stilled me with a light hand on my shoulder and brought her face before my lowered gaze. Her look had softened. She had been listening to our exchange. "Thank you, Dee, for everything." It was the first time she had addressed me by name. "Yes, ma'am," I said, embarrassed. "I better get back inside." "Be careful. Dick is chewing out the guys from the Weekly Standard. You might want to steer clear of the conference room." She paused, then indulged. "Of course, I think you've earned the right to see Crystal throwing himself at the VP's feet." "I'll pass," I said. "I saw that last time he was here." Our eyes met for the first and last time. We smiled conspiratorially and parted. My hand was heavy on the stairwell hatch. Gathering my strength, I looked back at Laura, pulling George's blanket closer about his neck, stroking his hair at the temple, lightly with the back of her fingers, as if to a child. From here they might as well have been at home on an identical afternoon. He content and she beloved, some other time, some other place. Any two people. I came back down the hole. April 20th. Everyone is gathered in the conference room. It's the VP's birthday. I can hear them singing a forced and shrill happy birthday right now. I know exactly what he looks like. his thin, mirthless grin drawing in the fearful air like a gill. I can see his beady eyes as they furtively scan back and forth with reptilian satisfaction, obscured behind the reflection in his glasses of the terrified, contorted faces of the false revelers. Well, this is it. Now's my chance. I'm leaving the bunker. Barney the dog has come in. He looks miserable, wagging his tail plaintively. He seems to understand. No, I'm sure he does. I gotta go, pal. Take care of yourself, I tell him, surprised to hear my voice cracking with emotion as I pat him on the head. Don't worry. The grim, insincere singing, the dog's helpless, imploring eyes. I have no choice. Oh, all right. Come on, boy. Let's go home. And that's the story. Okay. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.